The wedding dress box tumbled from the attic ladder, spilling ivory silk across the bakery floor like fallen snow. Kate Mitchell stared at the remnants of dreams she'd packed away 3 years ago, her hands trembling as she gathered the delicate fabric that would never again know a bride's joy. The morning sun streaming through the cafe windows seemed to mock her as she clutched the dress to her chest, remembering David's promise that they'd grow old together in this very building he'd helped her renovate. The bell above the door chimed, and Kate quickly shoved the dress back into its box, wiping tears she refused to acknowledge. A massive silhouette filled the doorway, and when she looked up she found herself staring into the kindest brown eyes she'd ever seen, belonging to a man so tall he had to duck beneath her door frame. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The man's boots echoed against the hardwood floors as he approached the counter, his presence somehow making the spacious bakery feel intimate. Kate had seen him around Millbrook Valley before, the Hayes rancher who kept to himself and spoke in measured words when he came to town for supplies. Everyone knew Mac Hayes by reputation, a gentle giant who'd taken in his orphaned niece after a tragedy that left the 8-year-old with no one else in the world. But Kate had never seen him up close, never noticed how his weathered hands moved with surprising delicacy as he removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed a trim and eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble that reminded her of distant thunder across the mountains. "I'm looking for Kate Mitchell. Helen Foster at the general store said you might be able to help me with something special." His gaze took in the overturned ladder, the scattered papers from the attic, and the hastily concealed wedding dress box, but he said nothing about the obvious distress written across her features. Kate smoothed her apron, buying herself a moment to compose the mask she wore for customers. "That's me. What can I do for you, Mr. Hayes?" The formality felt strange in her mouth, considering how small their town was and how their paths had crossed at community events over the years. Always at a distance, always with polite nods and nothing more. Max shifted his weight, suddenly looking less like the confident rancher who commanded respect at cattle auctions and more like a man uncertain of his footing. "It's about my niece Lily. She's turning 9 next month, and I want to throw her a proper birthday party, something she'll remember." He paused, studying Kate's face with an intensity that made her stomach flutter in ways she'd forgotten were possible. "Helen said you're the best baker in 3 counties and that you might consider catering the party if I asked real nice." The request was simple enough, the kind Kate fulfilled weekly for celebrations throughout Millbrook Valley. But something in Mac's voice, a vulnerable note beneath the practical words, made her look at him more carefully. She saw the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the weight of responsibility that came with raising a child alone while running a successful ranch. She recognized the careful way he held himself, as if he'd learned that showing too much emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford. "When is the party?" Kate asked, already calculating what she could prepare and how much time she'd need. Baking was her sanctuary, the one place where she could create beauty and joy even when her own heart felt empty. 3 years of perfecting recipes and building her business had given her purpose when everything else felt meaningless. "June 15th, Mac replied. "I know it's short notice, and I'm willing to pay whatever you think is fair. Lily's been through enough disappointment in her young life. I want this to be perfect for her." The protective love in his voice was unmistakable, and Kate felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared understanding about loss and the fierce desire to shield others from it. Kate pulled out her appointment book, flipping through pages filled with wedding cakes and anniversary celebrations, events that reminded her daily of the love she'd lost and the future that had died with David. "That's actually the day of the summer festival," she said, glancing up from her calendar. "The whole town will be celebrating. Are you sure you want to compete with that for attention?" Mac's smile transformed his entire face, revealing a warmth that had been hidden behind his careful reserve. "That's exactly why I picked that date. Lily loves the festival, but she's always felt like an outsider looking in. I thought if we combined her party with the festival somehow, she'd feel like she belongs. Like the whole town is celebrating with her." The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught Kate off guard. She'd become accustomed to orders from customers who wanted impressive displays for social media or competitive mothers trying to outdo each other at school events. But Mac's request came from a place of pure love, the desire to give a child a sense of belonging in a world that had already taken too much from her. "That's a beautiful idea," Kate said softly, and meant it. "I could make a special birthday cake that fits the festival theme, and maybe some treats that would work for both celebrations. We could set up a special table near the gazebo so Lily feels like the guest of honor." Mac's relief was visible, his broad shoulders relaxing as if he'd been holding his breath waiting for her answer. "You'd really do that? Even with all the festival preparation you must have?" Kate found herself nodding before she fully considered the implications. Taking on such a large project during her busiest time of year would mean long hours and sleepless nights. But something about Mac's quiet devotion to his niece, the way he'd clearly agonized over making this day special for her, reminded Kate of why she'd fallen in love with baking in the first place. Before loss had taught her to build walls around her heart. "I'll need to meet with Lily," Kate said, warming to the idea despite herself. "Find out what flavors she likes, what kind of decorations would make her happy. A birthday cake should reflect the person it's celebrating. She'd love that," Mac said, his smile growing wider. "She's been asking me to bring her into town more often, but I've been hesitant. The ranch keeps me busy, and I worry about her bothering people." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When they're trying to work. Kate tilted her head, studying Mac with new curiosity. Bothering people, she's 8 years old. What could she possibly do that would bother anyone? A shadow crossed Mac's features, and Kate caught a glimpse of old pain carefully hidden. "Lily's been through a lot. Sometimes she gets attached to people quickly, and I've learned it's better to keep her close to home where I can protect her from disappointment." The admission revealed more than Mac probably intended. Kate recognized the signs of someone who'd learned to expect hurt, who'd built careful boundaries to prevent further damage. She understood because she'd done the same thing, retreating into the safety of her bakery and the predictable rhythms of flour and sugar and heat. "Well," Kate said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice, "she won't be bothering me. Why don't you bring her by tomorrow afternoon? We can discuss the cake, and she can help me with some of the festival preparation if she wants to. I could use an extra pair of hands." Max stared at her as if she'd offered to lasso the moon. "You'd let her help? Really? Really?" Kate found herself smiling for the first time in weeks, a genuine expression that felt rusty from disuse. "I used to help my aunt in this bakery when I was her age. Some of my best memories are from standing on a step stool learning to decorate cookies and watching the magic happen in the ovens." Something shifted in the air between them, a moment of understanding that went deeper than a simple business transaction. Max studied Kate's face with new attention, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "You inherited this place from your aunt, Margaret Mitchell." Kate nodded. "She left it to me when she passed 5 years ago. David, my husband, helped me renovate it and reopen it as a café. We had plans." She trailed off, the familiar ache rising in her throat. Even after 3 years, talking about David still felt like pressing on a bruise that never quite healed. Mac's expression gentled with recognition and sympathy. "I heard about the accident. I'm sorry for your loss." The simple words, spoken without pity or awkward attempts at comfort, somehow meant more than all the casseroles and condolence cards Kate had received in the aftermath of David's death. Max spoke like someone who understood grief intimately, who knew that loss was a companion that never fully departed. "Thank you," Kate said quietly. "It's been 3 years, but sometimes it feels like yesterday." "Grief doesn't follow timelines," Mac replied, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. "People expect you to move on according to some invisible schedule, but healing happens at its own pace." Kate looked at him with new interest, wondering what losses had taught him such wisdom. The comfortable silence that fell between them felt natural rather than awkward, the kind of quiet understanding that usually took years to develop between people. The bakery door chimed again, and Helen Foster entered with her characteristic bustle of energy and purpose. The elderly woman took one look at Mac and Kate standing close together at the counter and smiled with obvious satisfaction. Mac Hayes, I see you found Kate, Helen said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. I told you she was the person to talk to about making something special happen. Mrs. Foster. Mac nodded respectfully, but Kate caught the slight flush that colored his neck above his collar. Kate's agreed to help with Lily's birthday party. Has she now? Helen's smile widened as she glanced between them. Well, that's wonderful news. Kate needs more projects that get her out of this bakery and into the community where she belongs. Kate shot Helen a warning look, recognizing the matchmaking gleam in the older woman's eyes. Helen had been trying to set Kate up with various eligible men around town for 2 years, seemingly unable to accept that Kate had no interest in romance or relationships. I should get back to the ranch, Max said, settling his hat back on his head. Lily will be home from school soon, and I want to tell her about tomorrow. What time should we come by? 3 o'clock, Kate suggested. The afternoon rush will be over, and we'll have plenty of time to plan. Mac nodded, extending his hand to Kate in a gesture that seemed both formal and intimate. When their fingers touched, Kate felt a jolt of awareness that startled her with its intensity. Mac's hand was warm and calloused from honest work, strong enough to gentle a skittish horse or comfort a grieving child. Thank you, Kate, he said, holding her gaze. This means more than you know. After Mac left, Kate found herself staring at the door long after his truck had disappeared down Main Street. The familiar weight of solitude that usually comforted her felt different now, less like peaceful sanctuary and more like self-imposed exile. That's a good man, Helen said, settling herself at one of the cafe tables with obvious intention to stay and chat. Been raising that little girl on his own since his brother and sister-in-law died in that car crash 2 years ago. Never complains, never asks for help, just does what needs doing. Kate busied herself wiping down the counter, trying to ignore the way her heart had started beating faster when Max smiled at her. It's just a business arrangement, Helen. I'm making a birthday cake, not planning a wedding. Helen's laugh was knowing and gentle. Oh honey, I've seen the way that man looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. And I just saw the way you looked at him. There's more happening here than birthday cake planning. You're imagining things, Kate said firmly, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm not interested in romance, Helen. You know that. What I know, Helen said, rising from her chair with the dignity of someone who'd lived long enough to recognize truth when she saw it, is that you've been hiding in this bakery for 3 years, convincing yourself that existing is the same as living. Maybe it's time to consider that David wouldn't want you to stop living just because he can't be here to live alongside you. The words hit Kate like a physical blow, forcing her to confront thoughts she'd been carefully avoiding. She'd built a comfortable routine around her grief, using David's memory as both shield and excuse to avoid the risks that came with opening her heart again. I can't, Kate whispered, the admission torn from some deep place she rarely acknowledged. I can't love again, Helen. It hurts too much when it's taken away. Helen's expression softened with understanding and compassion. Oh, sweetheart, love isn't something you turn on and off like a light switch. It's already happening whether you admit it or not. The question is whether you're brave enough to let it grow. That evening, Kate found herself standing in the apartment above the bakery, holding the wedding dress she'd hastily packed away that morning. The silk felt foreign in her hands now, a relic from a different life when she'd believed in forever and happy endings. She thought about Mac's gentle eyes and the way his voice had changed when he talked about his niece. She thought about the spark of attraction she'd felt despite every wall she'd built to prevent exactly that feeling. Carefully, Kate folded the dress and returned it to its box, but this time she didn't shove it back into the dark corners of the attic. Instead, she placed it gently in her bedroom closet, a gesture that felt like both goodbye and possibility. Tomorrow she would meet Lily Hayes and begin planning a birthday celebration. Tomorrow she would take the first tentative step back into a world where joy and connection were possible again. Tonight, For the first time in 3 years, Kate allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, Helen was right about love finding a way to grow even in the most carefully guarded hearts. As she prepared for bed, Kate caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror and was surprised to see a flush of color in her cheeks, a spark of life in her eyes that had been absent for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Change was coming to Millbrook Valley, arriving in the form of a gentle giant who made birthday wishes come true and little girls feel like they belonged. Kate fell asleep that night, with something she hadn't felt in years warming her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next afternoon arrived with the kind of perfect mountain weather that made tourists flock to Millbrook Valley, all azure skies and gentle breezes that carried the scent of wild flowers from the surrounding meadows. Kate had spent the morning in a state of nervous energy she couldn't quite explain, rearranging the display case 3 times and checking her reflection in every reflective surface she passed. She told herself it was simply professional anxiety about meeting a new client, but the flutter in her stomach suggested otherwise. At exactly 3 o'clock, the bakery door opened to reveal Mac Hayes, accompanied by a small girl with dark pigtails and eyes that held far too much wisdom for someone who hadn't yet reached double digits. Lily Hayes was a miniature version of her uncle in many ways, from her serious expression to the careful way she observed her surroundings before speaking. But where Mac's caution seemed born of experience and responsibility, Lily's felt like the protective shell of a child who'd learned early that the world could be unpredictable and cruel. "Miss Kate," Mac said, his hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. "I'd like you to meet my niece Lily. Lily, this is Miss Mitchell, the lady I told you about who's going to help us plan your birthday party." Kate knelt down to Lily's eye level, remembering how intimidating adults could seem when you were small and the world felt enormous around you. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily. Your uncle tells me you're going to be 9 years old. That's a very important birthday." Lily studied Kate with the intense scrutiny that children reserved for adults they weren't sure they could trust. "Uncle Max says you make the best cakes in Colorado. Is that true?" The direct question delivered with such serious consideration made Kate smile genuinely. "Well, I don't know about all of Colorado, but I do try my best to make cakes that taste as good as they look." "What's your favorite flavor?" "Chocolate," Lily replied without hesitation. "But not the kind that's too sweet. I like it when you can taste the chocolate, not just the sugar." Her sophisticated palate surprised Kate, who was accustomed to children requesting rainbow layers and as much frosting as possible. Mac chuckled softly, a sound that resonated through Kate's chest in ways she wasn't prepared for. "Lily's got particular tastes. She gets that from her mother. Emma always said life was too short for mediocre chocolate." The past tense fell into the conversation like a small stone into still water, creating ripples of sadness that Kate recognized all too well. She watched Lily's expression change slightly, a shadow crossing her features as the mention of her parents brought memories both precious and painful. "Your mother sounds like a smart woman," Kate said gently. "I happen to agree with her completely. Why don't we go into the kitchen and I'll show you how I make my triple chocolate cake. It's the kind where you can definitely taste the chocolate." Lily's eyes lit up with interest, the first genuine enthusiasm Kate had seen from the girl. "Can I really come into the kitchen? Uncle Mac never lets me help cook because he says I'll burn down the ranch." Mac's cheeks flushed slightly above his beard. "That's not exactly what I said. I said the kitchen is dangerous when you're not paying attention and you have a habit of getting distracted by butterflies and clouds and pretty much everything else." The gentle teasing between uncle and niece revealed a relationship built on love and understanding. Kate could see how Mac's protectiveness, born from his own fears of losing the last family he had, sometimes clashed with Lily's natural curiosity and desire for independence. It was a delicate balance that Kate recognized from her own childhood, when her parents had struggled with how much freedom to give a spirited daughter who wanted to experience everything the world had to offer. Well, in my kitchen, we pay very close attention to what we're doing, Kate said, extending her hand to Lily. But I could use an assistant who knows good chocolate when she tastes it. What do you say? Lily took Kate's offered hand with a trust that felt both precious and fragile. Uncle Mac, can I really help, please? Mac's expression softened as he watched his niece's excitement, and Kate saw the moment when his protective instincts yielded to his desire to see Lily happy. Of course you can help. Just listen to Miss Kate and do exactly what she tells you. The kitchen behind Mountain View Bakery was Kate's sanctuary, a space she'd designed for both efficiency and comfort. Industrial ovens stood alongside hand-me-down mixing bowls that had belonged to her aunt, and sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked the small herb garden Kate maintained behind the building. It was here that she felt most like herself, surrounded by the tools and ingredients that allowed her to create something beautiful from basic elements. Lily wandered around the kitchen with obvious fascination, her small hands trailing along countertops as she examined everything from the enormous stand mixer to the rows of measuring spoons hanging on hooks. It smells like vanilla and cinnamon in here, she said wonderingly. Like Christmas morning. That's because I was testing a new recipe this morning, Kate explained, pulling out ingredients for a sample chocolate cake. For the summer festival, I'm creating some special treats that capture different seasons. The vanilla-cinnamon combination was for my autumn spice cookies. Mac leaned against the doorframe, watching as Kate began assembling ingredients with practiced efficiency. There was something mesmerizing about watching someone who truly loved their work, the way Kate's movements became fluid and confident in her element. She pulled cocoa powder and dark chocolate from her supplies, explaining to Lily the difference between various types of chocolate and how they affected the final flavor. The secret to really good chocolate cake, Kate said, breaking off pieces of dark chocolate for Lily to taste, is using both cocoa powder and melted chocolate. The powder gives you deep flavor, and the melted chocolate adds richness and moisture. Lily tasted each sample with the seriousness of a professional critic, her face scrunching in concentration as she considered the flavors. This one, she said, pointing to a piece of 70% dark chocolate, tastes like what chocolate should taste like. Kate and Mac exchanged amused glances over Lily's head. You definitely have your mother's palate, Mac said fondly. Emma could tell the difference between chocolates just by smell. As they worked together, measuring and mixing, Kate found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't experienced in years. Lily proved to be an eager and careful assistant, following instructions precisely while asking thoughtful questions about why certain steps were necessary. Her curiosity reminded Kate of herself at that age, when the kitchen had seemed like a place where magic happened and anything was possible. Miss Kate, Lily said as they waited for the sample cake to bake. Uncle Mac says you used to be married. What happened to your husband? The innocent question hit Kate like a physical blow, stealing her breath for a moment as memories threatened to overwhelm her. Mac moved quickly to intervene, his face flushing with embarrassment. Lily, that's not appropriate to ask, he said gently but firmly. Some things are private. But Kate held up a hand, recognizing something in Lily's eyes that went beyond mere curiosity. The child had known loss herself, had experienced the bewildering pain of having people she loved simply disappear from her life. Perhaps she needed to know that other people had survived similar pain and found ways to continue living. It's okay, Kate said, settling onto a stool beside Lily. My husband David died in a car accident 3 years ago. It was very sudden, and I wasn't ready to say goodbye to him. Lily nodded solemnly, processing this information with the gravity it deserved. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to my mom and dad either. Uncle Max says they're watching over me now, but I wish they could come to my birthday party. The simple statement, delivered without self-pity but with profound sadness, made Kate's heart ache for this little girl who'd been forced to grow up too quickly. She glanced at Mac and saw her own pain reflected in his eyes, the helpless sorrow of adults who couldn't shield children from life's cruelest lessons. I think they will be there, Kate said softly. Maybe not in the way we can see them, but love doesn't disappear just because someone goes away. The love your parents had for you is still real, still part of who you are. Lily considered this carefully, then reached over and patted Kate's hand with surprising gentleness. I think your husband will be at my party too. If you want him to be. The unexpected kindness from this small girl who had every reason to be bitter about loss brought tears to Kate's eyes. She found herself nodding, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Max stepped closer, his large hand coming to rest briefly on Kate's shoulder in a gesture of comfort that felt natural and right. The timer chose that moment to ring, breaking the emotional tension as they turned their attention to the sample cake emerging golden and fragrant from the oven. Lily bounced with excitement as Kate demonstrated how to test for doneness, and the mood lightened as they discussed possibilities for the birthday cake design. What if we made it look like the ranch? Lily suggested, her imagination beginning to soar. With little horses and everything. Max smiled at his niece's enthusiasm, but Kate could see the concern in his eyes about the complexity of such a design. That might be pretty complicated, sweetheart. Miss Kate has a lot of other work to do for the festival. Actually, Kate said, surprising herself with her eagerness to take on the challenge. I think a ranch-themed cake could be beautiful. We could make it in tiers, like hills, and use green frosting for pastures. I could make little fondant horses and maybe a barn. Lily's gasp of delight was worth any amount of extra work the design would require. Really, with real-looking horses? Really, Kate confirmed, already envisioning the possibilities. We could even make one that looks like your favorite horse at the ranch. Thunder, Lily said immediately. He's a paint horse with brown and white patches, and he lets me brush his mane. Uncle Max says, Thunder picked me to be his special person. Mac's expression had grown thoughtful as he watched the interaction between Kate and his niece. There was something in his eyes that made Kate's pulse quicken, a warmth and appreciation that went beyond gratitude for professional services rendered. She found herself wondering what it would be like to be looked at like that regularly, to be seen as someone worth treasuring. Thunder sounds like a perfect centerpiece for a birthday cake, Kate said, forcing herself to focus on the practical details rather than the way Mac was making her feel. Why don't we plan to start working on the decorations next week? That will give me time to practice the design and make sure everything is perfect. They spent the next hour planning details, with Lily's excitement growing as each element was decided. Kate found herself caught up in the child's enthusiasm, remembering the joy of birthdays when she was young, and the world felt full of possibilities. It had been years since she'd felt this invested in a project beyond its commercial value. As they prepared to leave, Lily surprised Kate by wrapping her arms around her waist in a spontaneous hug. Thank you for making my birthday special, she said, her voice muffled against Kate's apron. And for telling me about your husband. I'm sorry he had to go away. Kate returned the hug, feeling something inside her chest crack open just a little. Thank you for letting me help with your party. It's going to be the best birthday celebration Millbrook Valley has ever seen. Mac lingered as Lily headed for the truck, his hat in his hands as he searched for words. Kate, I want you to know how much this means to us. To her. Lily hasn't been this excited about anything since. He trailed off, but Kate understood. She's a special little girl, Kate said, meaning it completely. You're doing an amazing job raising her, Mac. She's lucky to have you. Something shifted in Mac's expression, a vulnerability that he usually kept carefully hidden.
Some days I wonder if I'm enough for her. If she needs things I can't give her. The admission revealed depths to Mac Hayes that Kate was only beginning to understand. Here was a man who'd stepped up without hesitation when tragedy struck his family, who'd sacrificed his own desires to provide stability for a grieving child, yet still questioned whether his love was sufficient. From what I can see, Kate said gently, you're giving her exactly what she needs. Love, security, and the knowledge that she matters to someone. That's not small, Mac. That's everything. Mac's smile was soft and grateful, transforming his face in ways that made Kate's heart skip uncomfortably. Maybe you could come out to the ranch sometime before the party. Lily would love to show you Thunder and the other horses, and I'd like you to see where she's growing up. The invitation hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities that went far beyond birthday party planning. Kate knew she should decline, should maintain the professional boundaries that kept her safe from emotional entanglements. But looking into Mac's hopeful eyes, remembering Lily's infectious enthusiasm, she found herself nodding before
Caution could intervene. I'd like that, she heard herself saying. Maybe this weekend, Saturday afternoon, Max suggested, his relief evident. I could show you around, and Lily could give you the full tour. She's been practicing her horse knowledge ever since I told her you were helping with the party. They agreed on a time, and Kate watched from her bakery window as Mac's truck disappeared down Main Street. The building felt different after they left, less like a refuge and more like a starting point. For the first time in 3 years, Kate found herself looking forward to something beyond the safe routine of flour and sugar and solitary evenings. That evening, as Kate closed up the bakery, Helen Foster appeared at her door with the perfect timing of someone who'd been watching and waiting for the right moment. The older woman's knowing smile suggested she'd observed the afternoon's visitors and drawn her own conclusions about their significance. So, Helen said without preamble, settling herself at a table while Kate finished cleaning. How did the cake consultation go? Kate tried to keep her voice casual as she wiped down counters, but she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. Fine. Lily's a sweet child, and we've planned something special for her birthday. I'm sure you have, Helen said with obvious amusement. And what about her uncle? Still just a business arrangement? The question forced Kate to confront feelings she'd been trying to ignore all afternoon. The way her heart had raced when Max smiled, the comfort she'd felt when his hand touched her shoulder, the anticipation she was already feeling about visiting the ranch. These weren't the emotions of someone conducting a simple business transaction. Helen, Kate said, settling across from her friend with a sigh. What if you're right? What if there is something happening between Mac and me? I don't know how to do this anymore. I don't know how to be anything other than David's widow. Helen's expression softened with understanding and compassion. Oh honey, learning to live again after loss isn't about forgetting who you were. It's about discovering who you can become. David was part of your story, but he wasn't the whole story. The words echoed in Kate's mind long after Helen had gone home, following her into restless dreams where she found herself standing in endless fields of wild flowers, searching for a path she couldn't quite see, but somehow knew was there, waiting for her to find the courage to take the first step forward into whatever came next. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the bakery in the form of Dr. James Thompson, Millbrook Valley's physician and one of the few people who'd known Kate before tragedy redefined her life. James had been David's best friend since childhood, and his presence always carried echoes of shared memories and complicated emotions. Kate, James said, accepting the coffee she offered with a tired smile, I heard through the grapevine that you're working on something special for the Hayes girl's birthday. Word traveled fast in small towns, and Kate wasn't surprised that news of her collaboration with Mac had already begun making rounds. Lily's turning 9. Mac wants to make it memorable for her. James studied Kate's face with the careful attention of someone trained to read subtle signs and symptoms. It's good to see you taking on projects that get you involved with the community again. You've been too isolated for too long. The gentle criticism stung because it carried the weight of truth. James had been one of the few people brave enough to express concern about Kate's withdrawal from social connections, but until now she'd dismissed his worries as misguided interference. I'm fine, James. The bakery keeps me busy enough. Busy isn't the same as fulfilled, James replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd witnessed too much of life's fragility to waste time on polite pretenses. David wouldn't have wanted you to stop living just because he couldn't be here with you. The echo of Helen's words from the previous day made Kate's chest tighten with familiar resistance. Everyone seems to have opinions about what David would have wanted. Maybe I'm the only one who actually knew him well enough to say. James's expression grew gentle but firm. I knew David for 25 years, Kate. I was his best man at your wedding, and I held his hand when he died in my emergency room. The last thing he said to me was about you. Kate's breath caught, her carefully maintained composure cracking at this revelation. In 3 years, James had never mentioned David's final moments, and she'd been too afraid to ask for details that might make the loss even more unbearable. What did he say? The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. James reached across the table and took her hand. His touch warm and steady. He said, "Take care of Kate. Don't let her disappear into grief. She's got too much love left to give." The words hit Kate like a physical blow, forcing her to confront truths she'd been avoiding for 3 years. David had known her well enough to predict exactly how she would respond to losing him, had cared enough to worry about her future even as his own life slipped away. "I can't," Kate said, tears threatening despite her efforts to maintain control. "I can't risk loving someone again, James. I can't survive losing another person I care about." "But you're already caring about them," James said gently. "I saw the way you looked when you talked about Lily. Heard the softness in your voice when you mentioned Mac. Love isn't something you can turn off just because it's scary." That afternoon, as Kate prepared for her weekend visit to Sunset Ridge Ranch, she found herself standing once again before the mirror in her bedroom, trying to decide what to wear for a casual afternoon that felt anything but casual. She'd changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on jeans and a soft blue sweater that David had always said brought out her eyes. The thought brought with it a pang of guilt that had become familiar over the past few days. Was she betraying David's memory by allowing herself to feel attracted to another man? Was it wrong to imagine a future that didn't revolve entirely around preserving the past? But James's words echoed in her mind, along with Lily's innocent wisdom about love not disappearing when people went away. Perhaps it was possible to honor what she'd had with David while still remaining open to what might be possible with Mac. Perhaps healing didn't require forgetting, just expanding. Saturday afternoon arrived with perfect weather for a ranch visit, all sunshine and gentle breezes that carried the scent of hay and wildflowers across the valley. Kate drove the winding road to Sunset Ridge Ranch with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness that reminded her of teenage first dates, when everything felt significant and full of possibility. The ranch itself took her breath away, sprawling across a valley that seemed designed by nature specifically for this purpose. Rolling pastures stretched toward mountains that rose like ancient guardians, and the main house sat perfectly positioned to take advantage of views that would make postcards weep with envy. Kate could see why Mac had chosen to build his life here, why this place had become sanctuary for a grieving little girl who needed space to heal. Lily came running from the barn before Kate had even parked her car, her face bright with excitement and her clothes bearing evidence of a morning spent with horses. "Miss Kate, you came. Wait until you see Thunder. He's been extra pretty today because I told him you were coming to visit." Mac emerged from the barn more slowly, his pace measured but his smile genuine and welcoming. He'd changed from his usual ranch clothes into clean jeans and a button-down shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and made Kate acutely aware of him as a man rather than simply a client. "Welcome to Sunset Ridge," he said, removing his hat in a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and entirely natural. "I hope you're ready for the grand tour. Lily's been planning your visit all week." The next few hours passed in a blur of discovery and delight as Lily led Kate around the ranch with the enthusiasm of someone sharing her most treasured possessions. They visited the horses, including Thunder, who proved to be exactly as magnificent as Lily had described. They toured the barn, the chicken coop, and the vegetable garden that Mac maintained with surprising skill for someone whose hands looked better suited to heavy labor. Throughout it all, Kate found herself studying Mac when she thought he wasn't looking, noticing the gentle way he interacted with the animals, the patience he showed with Lily's endless questions, the quiet pride he took in what he'd built here. This was a man who'd found his place in the world and created something meaningful from hard work and dedication. As the afternoon sun began to slant toward evening, they settled on the front porch with glasses of lemonade that Lily had insisted on making herself. The child chattered about school and horses and her plans for her birthday party, while Kate and Mac listened with the indulgent attention of adults who understood how precious such moments were. "Miss Kate," Lily said suddenly, her expression growing serious, "do you think you might want to come live at the ranch sometime? We have lots of room, and Uncle Mac gets lonely even though he pretends he doesn't." Mac's face flushed red above his collar and he shot his niece a look of mortified embarrassment. "Lily, that's not appropriate to ask. Miss Kate has her own home and her business in town." But Kate found herself considering the question more seriously than she should have, imagining what it would be like to wake up to mountain views and the sound of horses whickering in the pasture. To share morning coffee on this porch with Mac, to help Lily with homework at the kitchen table, to be part of a family again, instead of simply existing on the margins of other people's lives. The longing that swept through her was so intense it took her breath away, forcing her to acknowledge how desperately lonely she'd become in her self-imposed isolation. But with the longing came fear, the terrifying knowledge that caring about Mac and Lily would mean risking the kind of loss that had nearly destroyed her once before. "I think your uncle is right that I need to stay in town for my business," Kate said carefully, trying to keep her voice light despite the turmoil in her chest. "But I'm very glad you invited me to visit today. Your ranch is beautiful." As Kate prepared to leave, Mac walked her to her car while Lily ran ahead to say goodbye to the horses one more time. The evening air was soft and sweet, filled with the sounds of cattle settling for the night and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. "Thank you for coming today," Mac said, his voice lower and more intimate than it had been all afternoon. "It means a lot to both of us to share this place with someone who understands how special it is." Kate looked up at him, struck by how the evening light emphasized the strong lines of his face and made his eyes seem impossibly warm. "Thank you for having me. I can see why Lily loves it here. It feels like home should feel." Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of attraction and possibility that made Kate's pulse quicken despite every wall she'd built to prevent exactly this feeling. Max stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and sunshine that clung to his skin. "Kate," he said softly, "I hope you know that what's happening between us has nothing to do with the birthday party or any business arrangement. I'd like to see you again, spend time with you when there's no agenda except getting to know each other better." The honest admission hung in the air between them, requiring a response that Kate wasn't sure she was ready to give. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to stop fighting the connection that had been growing stronger every moment they spent together. But another part, the part that still wore David's ring and kept his photos on her nightstand, whispered warnings about the dangers of opening her heart again. "Mac," she began, then stopped, unsure how to voice the conflicting emotions battling in her chest. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I'll ever be ready." His expression gentled with understanding rather than disappointment. "I'm not asking you to be ready for anything more than you can handle. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that maybe, with time, you could be." The gentleness in his voice, the patient acceptance of her fears, made Kate's carefully constructed defenses waver. Here was a man who wouldn't push or demand, or try to rush her past grief on someone else's timeline. Here was someone who seemed to understand that healing happened gradually, in small moments of connection and trust. "I can't promise anything," Kate said finally, the words feeling like both surrender and possibility. "I can't promise that I'll ever be able to love again the way you deserve to be loved." Mac's smile was soft and hopeful, transforming his face in ways that made Kate's heart skip dangerously. "I'm not asking for promises, Kate. I'm asking for a chance. 30 days to show you that love doesn't always end in loss, that sometimes it grows into something even more beautiful than what came before." 30 days, the time frame seemed both impossibly short and terrifyingly long, enough time for feelings to deepen beyond the point of easy retreat, but not long enough to feel like a lifetime commitment.
Kate found herself nodding before caution could intervene, agreeing to something that felt like the first real risk she'd taken since David died. 30 days, she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. But no expectations, Mac. No guarantees about where this leads. No expectations, he agreed, but the warmth in his eyes suggested he was already hoping for far more than Kate was ready to promise. Just honesty and time to see what develops naturally. As Kate drove home through the gathering dusk, she felt as though she was balanced on the edge of a cliff, uncertain whether the next step would be flight or falling. 30 days, to discover whether her heart was truly dead or simply sleeping, waiting for the right person to coax it back to life. 30 days, to find out if Mac Hayes could prove her wrong about love being too dangerous to risk again. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure, leaving her with the unsettling certainty that her carefully ordered life was about to become much more complicated, much more uncertain, and possibly, much more wonderful than anything she'd allowed herself to imagine in 3 long years of existing instead of truly living. The first week of Kate's 30-day agreement with Mac passed in a careful dance of stolen glances and meaningful conversations that felt both natural and terrifying. Mac appeared at the bakery each morning at precisely 7:30, ostensibly to pick up coffee and pastries for his ranch hands. But Kate suspected his real motivation had more to do with seeing her than feeding his employees. Their exchanges were brief but charged with an undercurrent of possibility that made Kate's hands shake as she prepared his order. On Wednesday morning, Mac lingered longer than usual, watching Kate arrange fresh muffins in the display case with the focused attention of someone memorizing details for later recall. The early morning light streaming through the windows caught the auburn highlights in her hair, and Mac found himself wondering what it would feel like to run his fingers through those soft strands. The summer festival committee met last night. Mac said, leaning against the counter in a way that brought him closer to Kate's workspace. Mary Beth Anderson mentioned that you volunteered to coordinate the baking competition again this year. Kate nodded, concentrating on the precise arrangement of blueberry muffins to avoid meeting Mac's eyes. I've done it for 3 years running. It's become tradition, I suppose. Mary Beth also mentioned that you've never entered the competition yourself, Mac continued, his tone carefully neutral. She seems to think that's a missed opportunity, considering your reputation. The observation made Kate pause in her work, finally looking up to meet Mac's steady gaze. It wouldn't be fair to the other contestants. I'm a professional baker competing against home cooks. Mac's smile was gentle but knowing. I think Mary Beth would argue that you're scared of losing, not of winning unfairly. The assessment hit closer to truth than Kate was comfortable acknowledging. Entering the competition would mean putting herself and her skills up for public judgment, risking failure in front of the entire community. It would mean stepping out from behind the safe anonymity of professional service into the vulnerable space of personal competition. Maybe I am, Kate admitted quietly, surprising herself with the honesty. Maybe I've gotten too comfortable playing it safe. There's nothing wrong with safety, Max said, his voice carrying undertones of deeper meaning. But sometimes the things worth having require a little risk. Their eyes met across the counter, and Kate felt the familiar flutter of attraction mixed with anxiety that had become her constant companion since agreeing to Mac's 30-day proposal. She was beginning to understand that every conversation with him was really about 2 things at once: the surface topic and the larger question of whether she was brave enough to open her heart again. I'll think about it, Kate said, both about the baking competition and the larger invitation implicit in Mac's words. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor in the form of Anna Mitchell Parker, Kate's younger sister who lived in Denver and rarely made the drive up to Millbrook Valley. Anna swept into the bakery with her usual energy and efficiency, her designer clothes and perfectly styled hair making Kate acutely aware of her own flour-dusted apron and practical ponytail. "Katie," Anna said, embracing her sister with genuine warmth despite their very different life choices. "You look good, really good. There's color in your cheeks again." Kate felt heat rise in those same cheeks at the observation. It's probably just the heat from the ovens. Summer baking is always warm work. Anna's knowing smile suggested she wasn't buying the innocent explanation. Or maybe it has something to do with the very large, very handsome rancher I saw leaving here this morning. Helen Foster was more than happy to fill me in on recent developments when I stopped at the general store. Of course, Helen had been watching and reporting. Kate should have expected that nothing in Millbrook Valley escaped the older woman's notice, especially when it involved potential romance for the town's most stubborn widow. Mac Hayes is a client, Kate said, busying herself with unnecessary cleaning to avoid Anna's penetrating stare. I'm helping plan his niece's birthday party. Helen mentioned the birthday party. Anna replied, settling herself at a table with obvious intention to stay for a proper conversation. She also mentioned several other interesting details about your sudden social activities. Ranch visits, long conversations, meaningful looks. Should I be planning to shop for a new dress? The assumption in Anna's voice made Kate's stomach clench with familiar panic. Anna, don't start planning weddings or imagining happy endings. I'm just helping with a child's birthday party. Anna's expression softened as she recognized the fear beneath Kate's defensive words. Katie, I know David's death broke something in you. I know you think loving someone again means betraying his memory or risking more loss. But look at yourself in the mirror lately. Really look. You're coming back to life, and it's beautiful to see. The words echoed James Thompson's recent observations, forcing Kate to acknowledge that the changes in her were apparently visible to everyone except herself. I can't do this, Anna. I can't risk feeling that much again. What if the real risk is not feeling anything at all? Anna asked gently. What if you're so afraid of potential loss that you're guaranteeing actual loss by refusing to engage with life? Before Kate could respond, the bakery door chimed to announce Lily's arrival, the little girl practically bouncing with excitement as she rushed to the counter. Miss Kate, Uncle Mac said I could come visit you after school today and help with festival preparations if it's okay with you. The sight of Lily's eager face immediately lifted Kate's spirits, reminding her why she'd agreed to Mac's proposition in the first place. This child had awakened something in Kate that had been dormant for years, a maternal instinct and protective love that had nothing to do with romantic feelings and everything to do with recognizing someone who needed care and attention. Of course it's okay, Kate said, moving around the counter to give Lily a welcoming hug. I could use help testing some new cookie recipes for the festival booth. Anna watched the interaction with obvious interest, noting the easy affection between Kate and the child. And who is this lovely young lady? This is Lily Hayes, Kate said, her hand resting protectively on the girl's shoulder. Lily, this is my sister Anna. She lives in the big city and does important business things I don't understand. Lily studied Anna with the careful assessment children reserved for new adults, taking in the expensive clothes and confident bearing. Are you married? Do you have kids? Anna laughed at the direct questioning, clearly charmed by Lily's straightforward approach. No to both questions. I'm too busy with work to think about family right now. That's sad, Lily said with the brutal honesty of childhood. Families are the best part of everything. Even when they make you sad sometimes, they're still the best part. The simple wisdom in the child's words created a moment of silence as both sisters absorbed the truth Lily had articulated so naturally. Here was a little girl who'd lost her parents yet still believed in the fundamental importance of love and connection, who understood that the risk of sadness didn't negate the value of happiness. You're absolutely right, Anna said softly, glancing meaningfully at Kate. Families are the best part of everything. They spent the next hour in the kitchen, with Lily proving to be an enthusiastic and capable assistant in testing cookie recipes for the festival booth. Anna observed from the sidelines, watching her sister interact with the child in ways that revealed depths of nurturing Kate had kept hidden for years. As they worked, Lily chattered about school and ranch life and her growing excitement about her upcoming birthday party. Miss Kate is making me the most beautiful cake ever, she told Anna proudly. It's going to look like our ranch with horses and everything. Uncle Mac says it will be too pretty to eat, but I told him that's silly because the best cakes are meant to be shared. Anna caught Kate's eye over Lily's head. Her expression clearly saying that a woman who would undertake such an elaborate project wasn't motivated solely by professional obligations. Kate flushed under her sister's knowing gaze but couldn't deny the truth implicit in the observation. When Mac arrived to collect Lily, he greeted Anna with polite courtesy that couldn't quite hide his curiosity about Kate's family. Anna in turn studied Mac with the protective scrutiny of a sister evaluating a potential brother-in-law, taking note of his gentle manner with Lily and the careful respect he showed Kate. It was lovely meeting you, Anna told Mac as they prepared to leave. I hope I'll have the chance to see you again soon. The subtle suggestion in her words wasn't lost on Mac, who glanced at Kate with a question in his eyes. I hope so too. Kate speaks of you often. After they left, Anna turned to Kate with barely contained excitement. Katie, that man is completely smitten with you. And unless I'm very much mistaken, the feeling is mutual whether you're ready to admit it or not. Kate sank onto a stool behind the counter, suddenly exhausted by the emotional undercurrents of the day. Anna, even if you're right, even if there are feelings developing between Mac and me, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be someone's girlfriend or partner or whatever this would be. I've been David's wife and then David's widow for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else. Anna's expression gentled with understanding and compassion. Maybe that's exactly the point, Katie. Maybe it's time to discover who Kate Mitchell is when she's not defined by loss or the past. Maybe Mac Hayes is offering you the chance to find out. That evening, Kate found herself walking through the small garden behind the bakery, among the herbs and flowers she'd planted, partly for culinary purposes and partly because David had always loved gardens. The lavender was beginning to bloom, filling the air with its soothing fragrance, and the tomato plants were heavy with fruit that would soon be ready for harvest. She'd created this space as a memorial to David, a place where she could feel close to him and remember their plans for the future they'd never had. But tonight, for the first time, the garden felt less like a shrine and more like a bridge between what had been and what might still be possible. Kate's phone buzzed with a text message from Mac that made her heart skip unexpectedly. Lily wants to know if you'd like to join us for dinner tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just ranch cooking and good company. She promises to behave herself and not ask any embarrassing questions. The invitation was simple but significant, a step beyond their carefully maintained professional relationship into something more personal and domestic. Kate stared at the message for several minutes, weighing her response and the implications of saying yes. Finally, she typed back, I'd like that. What can I bring? Mac's response came quickly. Just yourself, that's all we need. The next evening found Kate driving to Sunset Ridge Ranch with a container of fresh dinner rolls in the passenger seat, despite Mac's insistence that she didn't need to bring anything. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on a sundress that was casual enough for a ranch dinner, but pretty enough to show she'd made an effort. Lily met her at the front door with barely contained excitement, clearly delighted to be hosting an adult dinner guest. Miss Kate, Uncle Mac made his famous chili, and I helped him bake cornbread that only burned a little bit on the bottom. Mac appeared behind his niece, dish towel slung over his shoulder, and a smile that made Kate's stomach flutter in ways that were becoming dangerously familiar. The burned part adds character, he said solemnly. Or at least that's what I'm telling myself. The ranch house's interior was exactly what Kate had expected, comfortable and unpretentious with furniture chosen for durability rather than style. But there were touches that revealed both Mac's and Lily's personalities. A bookshelf filled with classics and children's stories, photographs of the ranch through different seasons, and Lily's artwork displayed with the pride of someone who considered her creations museum-worthy. Dinner was served at a scarred wooden table that looked like it had hosted countless family meals, and the conversation flowed with surprising ease. Lily regaled them with stories from school while Mac shared amusing anecdotes about ranch life, and Kate found herself laughing more than she had in months. "Miss Kate," Lily said as they finished eating, "do you want to see my room? I have pictures of my mom and dad, and Uncle Mac helped me make a special memory box." The invitation was clearly important to Lily, a sign of trust and acceptance that Kate understood shouldn't be taken lightly. She followed the little girl upstairs to a bedroom that managed to be both childish and sophisticated, filled with books and art supplies alongside the expected collection of stuffed animals. The photographs on Lily's nightstand showed a young couple with faces full of joy and promise, clearly deeply in love and devoted to their small daughter. Kate studied the images with interest, noting the resemblance between Lily's father and Mac, the way the little girl's mother had the same expressive eyes as her daughter. "They were really happy," Lily said, settling on her bed and patting the space beside her for Kate to join. "Uncle Mac says they would be proud of how I'm growing up, but sometimes I forget what Mommy's voice sounded like." The admission broke Kate's heart, reminding her of her own fears about forgetting details of David's presence. "I think that's normal," she said gently. "But you know what I've learned. Love doesn't need sound to be real. The love your parents had for you is still there, even when you can't remember exactly how it sounded." Lily nodded thoughtfully, then reached under her pillow to extract a worn stuffed rabbit. "This was Mommy's when she was
little. Uncle Max saved it for me from their house. Sometimes when I miss them really bad, I hold it, and it makes me feel better." Kate touched the soft fur of the well-loved toy, understanding completely the comfort that physical connections to lost loved ones could provide. "That's a very special rabbit. Your mommy must have loved it a lot to keep it all these years." "Uncle Max says that love gets passed down through families," Lily continued. "Like how mommy's love for the rabbit got passed to me, and how her love for me didn't go away when she went to heaven." The child's matter-of-fact acceptance of both loss and continuing love impressed Kate with its simple wisdom. Lily had found a way to honor her grief while still remaining open to new connections, something Kate was still struggling to achieve despite being decades older. When they returned downstairs, Mac was cleaning up the kitchen with efficient movements that suggested long practice at managing household tasks alone. He looked up as they entered, and Kate caught something soft and hopeful in his expression as he took in the sight of her and Lily together. "Lily showed me her memory box," Kate said, settling at the kitchen table while Lily ran to find a book she wanted to share. "You've helped her create something really beautiful there." Mac's hands stilled on the dish he was washing, and Kate saw a flash of vulnerability cross his features. "I worry sometimes that I'm not doing enough to keep their memory alive for her. I'm not her parent, just her uncle who's trying his best to fill impossible shoes." The admission revealed depths of insecurity that Mac usually kept hidden beneath his confident exterior. Kate rose from her chair, moving to stand beside him at the sink, close enough to smell the clean scent of soap and the lingering traces of his aftershave. "Mac, look at that little girl," Kate said softly, nodding toward the living room where they could hear Lily singing to herself as she searched for her book. "She's happy, she's secure. She knows she's loved. You're not just filling her parents' shoes, you're making your own path as her guardian and doing it beautifully." Mac turned to face her, his expression intense and grateful. "Thank you for saying that. Some days I feel like I'm drowning in responsibilities I never expected to have." They stood close together in the kitchen, the air between them charged with awareness and possibility. Kate could feel the warmth radiating from Mac's body, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could imagine what it would be like to step closer and discover whether his lips were as gentle as his voice. "Kate," Mac said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "These past 2 weeks having you in our lives, it's changed everything. Lily's happier than I've seen her since her parents died, and he paused, searching for words. "I'm remembering what it feels like to hope for things I thought I'd given up on." The honest admission made Kate's heart race with equal parts longing and fear. She could see the future Mac was imagining reflected in his eyes, could picture herself becoming part of this family that had already begun to feel like home. But the vision terrified her as much as it tempted her. "Mac," she began, but was interrupted by Lily's return with an armload of books and the announcement that she wanted to read to both of them before bedtime. They settled on the living room couch. Lily curled between them as she worked her way through her favorite stories with the dramatic flair of a born performer. Kate found herself relaxing into the domestic scene, letting the simple pleasure of shared stories and comfortable companionship wash over her defenses. As Lily's reading grew slower and her eyelids heavier, Max scooped her up with practiced ease. "Come on, little one. Time for bed." Kate waited in the living room while Mac tucked Lily in, surrounded by photographs and personal touches that spoke of lives being rebuilt after tragedy. When Mac returned, he carried 2 glasses of wine and a tentative smile. "I thought maybe we could sit on the porch for a while," he suggested. "The stars are particularly beautiful tonight." The front porch of the ranch house faced west toward the mountains, providing a view that took Kate's breath away even in the darkness. The sky was clear and vast, filled with more stars than were visible from town, and the air carried the sweet scent of hay and night-blooming flowers. They settled on the porch swing, close enough for Kate to feel the warmth of Mac's body but not quite touching. The wine was smooth and warming, and the gentle motion of the swing created a rhythm that felt peaceful and right. "This is what I missed most when I lived in the city," Max said quietly. "This sense of space and quiet, the feeling that you're connected to something larger than yourself." Kate sipped her wine and studied Mac's profile in the starlight. "Have you always lived here?" "No, I actually spent 10 years in Denver after college, working in corporate agriculture. Made good money, had a nice apartment, all the things you're supposed to want." Mac's voice carried traces of old dissatisfaction. "But when my brother died and I inherited this place, coming back felt like coming home in a way I'd never experienced before." "And Lily?" Mac's expression softened. "Lily made it complete. Gave me purpose beyond just maintaining the family property. She needed stability and love, and I needed someone to care for. It worked out perfectly, even though I had no idea what I was doing at first." Kate found herself studying the man beside her with new appreciation. Mac had given up his established life to provide for an orphaned child, had traded urban sophistication for rural responsibility without apparent regret. The sacrifice spoke to character depths that impressed and attracted her. "What about you?" Mac asked, turning slightly to face her on the swing. "Have you ever thought about leaving Millbrook Valley, expanding the bakery business, or trying something completely different?" The question forced Kate to confront dreams she'd buried along with David. "We used to talk about opening a second location in Aspen or Vail. David thought the tourist market would support a high-end bakery specializing in European techniques. I'd trained in France for a summer during culinary school, and he was always encouraging me to use those skills more creatively. But after he died, you stayed here." Kate nodded, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest that came with discussing abandoned plans. "I couldn't imagine doing any of it without him. The dreams felt too connected to who we were together." Mac was quiet for several moments, considering her words. Maybe the dreams don't have to die with the person who shared them. Maybe they just need to evolve into something new. The gentle suggestion planted a seed of possibility that Kate wasn't sure she was ready to nurture. Change had become her enemy over the past 3 years, something to be avoided rather than embraced. But sitting here with Mac, feeling more alive and hopeful than she had since David's death, she began to wonder if avoiding change was really protecting her, or simply keeping her trapped in a life half-lived. "Kate," Mac said, his voice low and serious, "I need you to know that I'm not trying to replace what you had with David. I would never presume to think I could duplicate something that's special. But I am hoping that maybe you could find room in your heart for something different, something new." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying in their implications. Kate felt tears prick her eyes as she recognized the careful way Mac was approaching her emotional walls. How he was offering patience and understanding rather than demanding immediate capitulation. "I'm scared, Mac," she whispered, the admission torn from some deep place she rarely acknowledged. "I'm scared of caring about you and Lily and then losing you both. I'm scared of dishonoring David's memory by moving forward. I'm scared of everything." Mac reached over and took her hand, his touch warm and steady and reassuring. Fear is normal, Kate. Fear means you're alive and aware of what matters. But don't let fear make decisions for you. Don't let it cheat you out of possibilities you might regret missing. They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands linked and hearts opening despite every rational reason for caution. Kate found herself memorizing details of the moment. The sound of night birds calling across the valley, the scent of Mac's cologne mixed with the clean mountain air, the way starlight silvered the peaks surrounding them. When Mac walked her to her car later that evening, Kate felt as though she was leaving more than just a dinner invitation behind. She was leaving the safety of emotional distance, the comfort of predictable solitude, the familiar pain of choosing grief over growth. "Thank you for tonight," she said, standing beside her car and looking up into Mac's eyes. "For dinner, for sharing your home, for being patient with all my complications." Mac smiled, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face in a gesture so tender it made Kate's breath catch. "You're not complicated, Kate. You're careful. There's a difference." The distinction felt important, a reframing that cast her caution in a more positive light. Kate found herself leaning slightly toward Mac, drawn by an attraction that was becoming impossible to ignore or deny. "Kate," Mac said softly, his hand still resting against her cheek, "I'd very much like to kiss you right now, but only if you want me to." The request, asked with such gentle courtesy, made Kate's heart race with anticipation and terror. Kissing Mac would cross a line she'd maintained for 3 years, would acknowledge that her feelings for him had moved beyond friendship or professional relationship into something deeper and more dangerous. But looking into his eyes, seeing the patience and understanding written there, Kate found herself nodding before courage could desert her. "I'd like that too." Mac's kiss was everything Kate had imagined, and nothing she was prepared for. Gentle but confident, tender but thorough, it awakened responses in her body that had been dormant for so long she'd almost forgotten they existed. When they finally broke apart, Kate felt dizzy and breathless and more alive than she had in years. "Wow," she whispered, touching her lips as if to confirm that the kiss had actually happened. Mac's smile was soft and satisfied and full of promise. That was worth waiting for. As Kate drove home through the sleeping town, she felt as though she was seeing everything with new eyes. The familiar streets looked different somehow, less like the boundaries of a comfortable prison and more like the foundation for a future she was only beginning to imagine. That night, for the first time since David's death, Kate fell asleep without looking at his photograph on her nightstand, without reviewing memories of their life together, without analyzing her grief for signs of betrayal or healing. Instead, she dreamed of mountain starlight and gentle kisses, of a little girl's laughter and a man's patient love, of possibilities that felt both terrifying and wonderful in their potential for joy. The morning after her first kiss with Mac, Kate woke to find the world transformed in ways that had nothing to do with weather or season. Sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows seemed brighter. The familiar sounds of Millbrook Valley waking up carried new music, and even her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman she barely recognized. There was color in her cheeks, light in her eyes, and something that looked suspiciously like happiness softening features that had been set in careful neutrality for 3 years. The revelation terrified her. Kate stood in her kitchen, mechanically going through the motions of opening the bakery while her mind replayed every moment of the previous evening. Mac's gentle hands, the warmth of his lips, the way her entire body had responded to his touch as if awakening from a long sleep. She'd driven home in a haze of wonder and possibility, but morning brought with it the harsh light of reality and the weight of choices she wasn't sure she was ready to make. The bell above the bakery door chimed at 7:15, earlier than usual for her first customer, and Kate looked up to find Sheriff Bob Jackson standing in her doorway with an expression that immediately set her on edge. Bob was a good man and a fair lawman, but his presence at this hour suggested official business rather than a casual desire for coffee and pastries. "Morning, Kate," Bob said,
removing his hat and fidgeting with the brim in a way that telegraphed discomfort. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, but I need to ask you a few questions about Mac Hayes. Kate's blood went cold, every protective instinct she'd developed over the past weeks flaring to life. What about Mac? Is something wrong? Is Lily hurt? No, nothing like that, Bob assured her quickly, but his continued unease suggested the truth was more complicated than simple reassurance. It's about some reports I've been getting. Concerns from certain members of the community about Mac's situation with his niece. The careful phrasing didn't disguise the ugly implications, and Kate felt anger rise in her throat like acid. What kind of concerns? And from whom? Bob shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Kate, you know I have to investigate when citizens file complaints, even when I personally think they're unfounded. William Crawford at the bank has been raising questions about Mac's fitness as Lily's guardian. Claims he's observed behavior that suggests Mac might not be providing adequate supervision. Kate stared at the sheriff in disbelief, her mind racing as she tried to process this unexpected attack on the man who'd shown her what love could look like when it was patient and kind. That's ridiculous, Bob. Mac Hayes is a wonderful guardian. Lily is happy, healthy, well cared for, and loved. What could Crawford possibly have seen that would suggest otherwise? He's citing several incidents, Bob replied, consulting his notebook with obvious reluctance. Mac bringing Lily to town more frequently than Crawford thinks appropriate for a young girl. Her spending time here at the bakery without what Crawford considers proper supervision. The child being allowed to help with ranch work that Crawford deems too dangerous for someone her age. Each accusation felt like a personal attack, and Kate realized with crystal clarity that someone was targeting Mac through his relationship with her. The timing was too convenient, the complaints too precisely crafted to be coincidental. Someone wanted to separate Mac from Lily, and they were using Kate's growing involvement in their lives as ammunition. Bob, you know William Crawford, Kate said, her voice tight with controlled fury. He's been trying to pressure Mac into selling the ranch for 2 years. This isn't about Lily's welfare. This is about land acquisition and financial gain. The sheriff nodded grimly. I know Crawford's reputation, Kate. I also know Mac Hayes. And I've seen how he is with that little girl. But I have to follow procedure. I need to conduct interviews, file reports, cover all the legal requirements. If I don't, Crawford will go over my head to the county authorities. Kate felt the walls closing in around the fragile happiness she'd just begun to allow herself. Someone was weaponizing her relationship with Mac and Lily, using their growing connection as evidence of impropriety or neglect. The cruelty of it took her breath away. What do you need from me? Kate asked, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. Just honesty about your interactions with Mac and Lily. Your observations about their relationship, Lily's behavior when she's here. Anything that might help me write a report that puts these complaints in proper context. Kate spent the next hour providing detailed accounts of every interaction she'd witnessed between Mac and his niece, describing Lily's obvious security and happiness, Mac's careful attention to her needs and development. But even as she spoke, Kate could feel something precious slipping away, the innocent joy of new love being tainted by external threats and cruel motivations. After Bob left, Kate found herself staring at the phone, wanting desperately to call Mac and warn him about Crawford's machinations. But something held her back, a growing certainty that her involvement in Mac's life was creating problems she'd never anticipated. Maybe the safest thing for both Mac and Lily would be for Kate to step back, to return to the carefully controlled distance that had protected everyone for 3 years. The thought made her feel physically sick, but she couldn't ignore the possibility that loving Mac and Lily might put them in danger she was powerless to prevent. The day passed in a blur of routine tasks and anxious thoughts, punctuated by the arrival of several customers who seemed more interested in fishing for information about Kate's relationship with Mac than purchasing baked goods. Word was spreading through Millbrook Valley's gossip network, and Kate could feel the weight of community scrutiny in ways she'd managed to avoid since David's death. At 3 o'clock, Mac arrived for what had become their daily coffee ritual, but Kate immediately sensed tension in his posture that hadn't been there the night before. His smile was strained, his movements careful and controlled, and when their eyes met, she saw something that looked like resignation shadowing his usual warmth. "Kate," Mac said quietly, accepting the coffee she offered but not drinking it. "I think we need to talk." The words confirmed Kate's worst fears, and she felt her carefully rebuilt world beginning to crumble around the edges. "Bob Jackson was here this morning. He told me about Crawford's complaints." Mac nodded grimly. "Crawford came to see me first thing this morning. Made it very clear that my relationship with you was being viewed as evidence of poor judgment and inadequate attention to Lily's needs. He suggested that if I wanted to avoid a custody investigation, I should consider limiting my social activities." The casual cruelty of the threat made Kate's hands shake with suppressed rage. "Mac, you can't let him manipulate you this way. Crawford wants your land, and he's using Lily as leverage." "I know exactly what Crawford is doing," Mac replied, his voice heavy with frustration and pain. "But I also know that if Child Protective Services gets involved, even unfounded accusations can create complications that last for months or years. I can't put Lily through that uncertainty." Kate set down her coffee cup carefully, afraid that her trembling hands would betray the depth of her distress. "So what are you saying?" Mac's eyes held hers, and Kate saw her own heartbreak reflected in their depths. "I'm saying that maybe we move too fast. Maybe we let our feelings cloud our judgment about what's best for Lily." The words hit Kate like physical blows, each one designed to create distance where intimacy had been growing. She recognized the tactic because she'd used it herself for 3 years. Choosing safety over connection, isolation over risk. "Mac, please don't do this," Kate said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't let Crawford win by making us choose between love and Lily's security. There has to be another way." Mac's expression was torn between longing and resolve, and Kate could see the internal battle playing out across his features. "Kate, last night was the most alive I've felt in 2 years. Being with you, imagining a future where we could be a real family. It was everything I didn't know I was missing. But I can't risk Lily's stability for my own happiness. I won't." The noble sacrifice should have made Kate angry, but instead she found herself falling more deeply in love with this man, who would give up his own desires to protect a child who wasn't even biologically his. Mac's willingness to choose Lily's welfare over his own happiness revealed depths of character that made Kate's heart ache with admiration and loss. "What if we fight back?" Kate asked, desperation making her voice urgent. "What if we expose Crawford's real motivations? Get the community to see what he's actually doing?" Mac shook his head sadly. "Kate, you know how small towns work. Once suspicion takes root, it grows whether it's justified or not. I can't afford to gamble with Lily's future based on the hope that people will choose truth over gossip." They stood on opposite sides of the counter, close enough to touch but separated by circumstances that felt insurmountable. Kate could see the future they'd begun to imagine dissolving in real time, and the loss felt almost as devastating as David's death had been 3 years earlier. "So that's it?" Kate asked, tears threatening despite her efforts to remain composed. "We just give up. Pretend last night never happened." Mac's composure cracked slightly, revealing the pain he was trying so hard to hide. "Kate, if there was any other way, any possibility of fighting this without putting Lily at risk, I would choose you in a heartbeat. But I can't be selfish when it comes to her welfare." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lily herself, bursting through the bakery door with her usual enthusiasm, unaware of the emotional wreckage her presence was interrupting. She looked between Kate and Mac with growing confusion as she registered the tension in the air. "Uncle Mac?" Miss Kate, did something bad happen? You both look sad. Mac immediately shifted into protective mode, his expression smoothing into something approaching normalcy as he knelt to Lily's level. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Miss Kate and I were just discussing some grown-up business stuff. But Lily was too perceptive to be fooled by adult platitudes. Her gaze moved between them again, and Kate saw the exact moment when the child realized that something fundamental had changed in the dynamic she'd been so happy about. Are you not going to be friends anymore? Lily asked, her voice small and worried. Did I do something wrong? The question broke Kate's heart completely. Here was a child who'd already lost too much, now faced with the possibility that her growing attachment to Kate might be another relationship destined for disappearance and disappointment. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. Kate managed, kneeling down to meet Lily's eyes. Sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions about what's best for the people they love most. Lily's expression grew solemn as she processed this information. Like when mommy and daddy had to go to heaven even though they didn't want to leave me. The innocent comparison to her parents' death revealed how deeply Lily was already connecting this potential loss to her previous experiences with abandonment. Kate felt tears spill over as she realized that trying to protect this child from one kind of pain might be inflicting an entirely different kind of hurt. Something like that, Kate said softly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. But different too, because this doesn't have anything to do with love. Uncle Mac and I both care about you very much. Lily nodded slowly, but Kate could see the confusion and sadness in her young eyes. The child had been opening her heart to the possibility of extended family, and now that possibility was being yanked away by adult complications she couldn't understand or control. Can I still help you with festival preparations? Lily asked, her voice hopeful despite the uncertainty surrounding her. And will you still make my birthday cake? Kate looked over Lily's head at Mac, seeing her own conflict reflected in his expression. They were both trapped between their growing love for this child and the external pressures threatening to tear their small family apart before it had even fully formed. Of course I'll still make your birthday cake, Kate said firmly, making a decision that felt both right and terrible. That's a promise, and I don't break promises to people I care about. After Mac and Lily left, Kate found herself alone with the wreckage of hope she'd barely begun to acknowledge. The bakery felt different now, less like sanctuary and more like prison, the familiar walls closing in around dreams that had been beautiful but brief. That evening, Helen Foster appeared at Kate's door with the impeccable timing of someone who'd been monitoring the situation and waiting for the right moment to intervene. The older woman took one look at Kate's face and immediately set about making tea with the efficient care of someone accustomed to providing comfort in times of crisis. William Crawford is a snake, Helen said without preamble, settling at Kate's kitchen table with two steaming mugs. Always has been. Always will be. But he's also a coward who preys on people's fears and good intentions. Kate accepted the tea gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic as if it could provide the comfort her heart desperately needed. Helen, what if Mac is right? What if my involvement in their lives really is putting Lily at risk? Helen's snort of derision was eloquent in its dismissal of such concerns. Kate Mitchell, that little girl has been happier in the past month than I've seen her since her parents died. You think that's coincidence? You think Mac Hayes has been walking around with actual joy on his face because of the weather? The observation forced Kate to acknowledge truths she'd been trying to ignore in her spiral of guilt and self-doubt. Lily had been thriving with increased social connection, and Mac had seemed lighter and more hopeful than anyone had seen him since taking on single parenthood. But if fighting Crawford means risking a custody investigation, Kate began, then we make sure Crawford doesn't have anything to investigate. Helen interrupted firmly. We document every interaction. We gather witnesses to Mac's excellent parenting. We build a case so solid that even a motivated bureaucrat couldn't find fault with it. The suggestion sparked something in Kate that felt like hope mixed with determination. You think that would work? I think William Crawford is counting on Mac being too scared and you being too guilty to fight back effectively. Helen replied. He's banking on your love for each other being a weakness instead of a strength. Maybe it's time to prove him wrong. Kate spent the rest of the evening considering Helen's words, weighing the risks of fighting back against the certainty of loss if she simply accepted defeat. By the time she went to bed, she'd made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. The next morning, Kate opened the bakery early and spent the first hour making phone calls to Anna in Denver, asking her sister to research William Crawford's business dealings and potential conflicts of interest. To Dr. James Thompson, requesting his professional opinion on Lily's health and development under Mac's care. To Mary Beth Anderson and other ranch neighbors, asking them to provide written statements about Mac's character and parenting abilities. If Crawford wanted a fight, Kate was going to give him one. The strategy session that convened in Kate's bakery that afternoon looked like a war council, with Helen Foster serving as general and Anna arriving from Denver with a briefcase full of information about Crawford's questionable lending practices and aggressive land acquisition tactics. Mary Beth Anderson brought statements from half a dozen ranchers who'd witnessed Mac's devoted care of Lily, and Dr. Thompson provided medical records showing a healthy, well-adjusted child under Mac's guardianship. Crawford's been using the same tactics for years, Anna reported, spreading documents across Kate's largest table, identifying vulnerable property owners, then finding ways to pressure them into selling below market value. Mac's ranch is worth 3 times what Crawford's been offering, especially with water rights and mineral potential. Helen studied the papers with the focused attention of someone who'd been watching Crawford's machinations for decades. The question is how to expose his motivations without giving him more ammunition to use against Mac and Lily. Kate had been thinking about that exact problem since making her decision to fight back. What if we don't just defend against his accusations? What if we go on the offensive? The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications of Kate's suggestion. Fighting back against Crawford would mean risking everything, potentially making the situation worse instead of better. But it would also mean refusing to let fear and manipulation dictate the shape of their lives. What did you have in mind? Anna asked, her lawyer's instincts clearly engaged. Kate took a deep breath, steeling herself for what felt like the most important battle of her life. We make Crawford's real motivations public. We show the community exactly what he's been doing and why. We force him to defend his actions
instead of forcing Mac to defend his love. The plan that emerged over the next 2 hours was both simple and audacious. It would use the summer festival as a platform to expose Crawford's pattern of behavior, presenting evidence of his tactics to the entire community at once. Kate would enter the baking competition she'd been avoiding, using her platform as winner to address the crowd about more than just recipes and techniques. It was a gamble that could backfire spectacularly, potentially giving Crawford even more ammunition if the community chose to support him over Mac and Kate. But it was also an opportunity to change the narrative, to transform defense into offense and fear into action. That evening, Kate drove to Sunset Ridge Ranch with a heart full of nervous determination and a folder full of evidence. She found Mac in the barn, mechanically going through evening chores with the distracted air of someone whose mind was elsewhere. "Kate," he said, looking up from the horse he was brushing with surprise and something that looked dangerously like hope. "I wasn't expecting to see you. Mac, we need to talk," Kate said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. "About Crawford. About Lily. About us. I have an idea, but it's going to require both of us to be braver than we've ever been." Max set down his brush and gave Kate his full attention, something in her tone apparently conveying the seriousness of her purpose. "What kind of idea?" Kate spread the documents Anna had compiled across a hay bale, explaining Crawford's history and the pattern of behavior that Mac's situation fit perfectly. She outlined the plan to expose his tactics publicly, to turn the community's attention to Crawford's motivations rather than Mac's parenting. It's a risk, Kate acknowledged as she finished her presentation. If it backfires, if the community chooses to support Crawford, it could make things worse for you and Lily. But if it works, if we can show people what's really happening, then maybe we can stop this before it goes any further. Max studied the evidence with growing amazement and anger, clearly seeing the larger picture for the first time. Kate, this could destroy Crawford's reputation permanently. It could ruin his business, his standing in the community. Good, Kate said firmly. He's been destroying other people's lives for years. Maybe it's time someone held him accountable. Mac looked at Kate with something that might have been awe, seeing her transformed from the careful, withdrawn woman he'd first met into someone fierce and protective and willing to fight for the people she loved. Kate, if we do this, if we take on Crawford publicly, there's no going back. We'll be committed to each other and to this fight in ways that can't be undone. The warning carried implications that went far beyond their battle with Crawford, and Kate felt her heart race as she recognized the larger question Mac was asking. Was she ready to commit not just to fighting for their relationship, but to the relationship itself? Was she prepared to risk her heart completely for the possibility of love? Mac, Kate said, her voice soft but certain, 30 days ago, you asked me to let you prove that I could love again. I think it's time I proved it to myself. Mac's smile was brilliant and relieved and full of promises. Kate was finally ready to accept. Does this mean you're willing to fight for us? This means I'm willing to fight for our family. Kate corrected, the words feeling both natural and revolutionary. All three of us. The kiss that followed was different from their first, filled with determination and commitment rather than tentative exploration. Kate felt her last walls crumble as she finally allowed herself to believe in the possibility of forever with this man and the child who'd stolen her heart. When they broke apart, Mac rested his forehead against Kate's, both of them breathing hard from emotion and possibility. Kate, I love you. I've been falling in love with you since the first day you opened your door to us, and I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. The words Kate had been afraid to hear, afraid to say, afraid to believe in, finally felt safe and right and true. I love you too, Mac. I love you and I love Lily. And I'm ready to fight for the life we could have together. The summer festival dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect mountain weather that made Millbrook Valley look like a postcard designed to sell dreams of small-town life. Kate arrived early to set up her competition entry. An elaborate three-tiered cake decorated with sugar flowers so realistic, they looked like they'd been picked from an actual garden. But the cake was just the opening act for what Kate really planned to accomplish that day. The baking competition judging took place at noon, with Kate's creation earning the blue ribbon she'd been capable of winning for years, but had never been brave enough to pursue. As the winner, she was invited to address the crowd from the gazebo, ostensibly to share baking tips and acknowledge the other competitors. Instead, Kate used her platform to tell a different kind of story. She spoke about Crawford's systematic targeting of vulnerable property owners, using Anna's research to document a pattern of behavior that had been hidden in plain sight for years. She talked about the importance of protecting families like Mac and Lily's from manipulation disguised as concern. She challenged the community to decide what kind of town they wanted to be, one that allowed bullies to prey on the vulnerable or one that stood up for justice and truth. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ranchers who'd been pressured by Crawford stepped forward with their own stories. Business owners who'd witnessed his tactics added their voices to the growing chorus of opposition. By the end of the day, Crawford found himself facing not just Kate and Mac, but an entire community that had finally seen his true nature clearly. The custody complaints disappeared as quickly as they'd appeared, with Crawford apparently deciding that retreat was preferable to the continued public scrutiny his accusations had provoked. As the festival wound down and the stars began to appear over Millbrook Valley, Kate found herself standing with Mac and Lily beside the gazebo, where she'd made her public declaration of love and commitment. Lily was sticky with cotton candy and glowing with the satisfaction of a perfect birthday celebration, while Mac held Kate's hand with the secure grip of a man who no longer had to choose between love and responsibility. "Miss Kate," Lily said, leaning against Kate's side with the casual affection of a child who'd found her place in the world, This was the best birthday ever. Even better than I imagined when I wished for a family. Kate's heart swelled with emotion as she realized that somewhere during their battle for the right to love each other, she'd stopped being afraid of the future and started building it instead. The 30 days Mac had asked for had become the foundation for a lifetime of possibilities. I love you too, little one, Kate whispered, wrapping her arms around both Mac and Lily as the first fireworks of the evening lit up the sky above them. I love both of you more than I ever thought I could love again. Mac's kiss was gentle and sure, tasting of promises kept and dreams finally allowed to flourish. When they broke apart, all three of them were laughing, drunk on happiness and the sweet knowledge that sometimes love really could conquer fear. 6 months later, Kate stood in her bakery wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers picked from the meadows around Sunset Ridge Ranch. The wedding was small and perfect, attended by the community that had rallied around their love and witnessed by the mountains that had brought them together. As Max slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Kate felt David's presence like a blessing rather than a burden. A gentle reminder that love didn't end with death but expanded to encompass new possibilities and new joy. She was no longer David's widow or Mac's girlfriend, but simply Kate Hayes, a woman who'd learned that hearts broken by loss could be healed by love when the right person came along with enough patience to prove that forever was possible again. Lily served as flower girl and unofficial matchmaker, beaming with pride as she watched her carefully orchestrated plan for family creation come to fruition. During the reception, she pulled Kate aside with the serious expression she wore for important announcements. "Miss Kate, I mean Mom Kate, I think you should know that I've been praying for you to marry Uncle Mac since the first day you made me that chocolate cake. I figured God needed some help arranging things, so I asked for extra family for my birthday." Kate laughed through tears of joy, marveling at the wisdom of a child who'd understood from the beginning what the adults had been too scared to acknowledge. Sometimes the best gifts came disguised as ordinary moments, and sometimes the greatest love stories began with 3 knocks on a door during a storm. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Kate found herself standing with Mac on the front porch of their ranch house, watching Lily chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. The child who'd brought them together was finally secure in the knowledge that love didn't have to disappear, that families could grow rather than just diminish, that sometimes fairy tales came true in the most unexpected ways. "No regrets?" Mac asked, pulling Kate close as they watched their daughter's joy. Kate smiled, thinking of all the fears she'd conquered and walls she'd torn down to reach this moment of perfect contentment. "Only that it took me so long to believe you when you said I could love again." Mac's laughter was warm and satisfied, the sound of a man who'd won the greatest prize of his life simply by being patient enough to wait for healing to happen naturally. 30 days, he reminded her. "You promised me 30 days to prove you wrong. It only took 29. Kate kissed her husband under the vast Montana sky, surrounded by the sound of their daughter's laughter and the sweet knowledge that sometimes the best love stories were the ones that began with whispered fears and ended with shouted joy. She'd learned to love again, not because Mac had forced her to, but because he'd created the safety and space for love to grow in its own time and way. As the first stars appeared overhead, Kate Hayes closed her eyes and made a wish of her own. A prayer of gratitude for second chances and patient hearts and little girls wise enough to believe in happy endings even when the adults around them had forgotten how. Love, she discovered, wasn't something you fell into or out of, but something you chose again and again, day after day, through courage and commitment and the unwavering belief that some things were worth fighting for no matter how much they scared you. The 30 days had become 30 years in her heart. A lifetime of love that had begun with a man brave enough to challenge her fears and gentle enough to heal her heart. Kate had learned to love again, and in doing so, had learned to live again too. The confrontation with William Crawford came to a head on a Tuesday morning that started like any other but would end with Kate's entire world shifting on its axis. She was arranging fresh scones in the display case when Crawford himself walked through her bakery door, his expensive suit and calculated smile immediately setting her on edge. The banker had never been a customer before, and his presence at 8 in the morning felt like a predator circling prey. "Miss Mitchell," Crawford said, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy.
I wonder if I might have a word with you about a matter of mutual concern. Kate straightened slowly, every instinct screaming danger as she took in Crawford's confident bearing and the manila folder tucked under his arm. If this is about a business loan, Mr. Crawford, I'm not interested. The bakery is doing fine on its own. Crawford's laugh was cold and calculated, the sound of a man who held cards he was eager to play. Oh, this isn't about your little bakery, Miss Mitchell. This is about your relationship with Mac Hayes and the welfare of an innocent child who's being exposed to influences that some might consider inappropriate. The threat was delivered with such casual cruelty that Kate felt her breath catch in her throat. Here was the weapon Crawford had been sharpening, the attack designed to separate her from Mac and Lily by weaponizing their growing love against them. I don't know what you think you've observed, Kate said carefully, but my relationship with Mac and Lily is entirely appropriate and beneficial to everyone involved. Crawford opened his folder with theatrical precision, extracting photographs that made Kate's blood run cold. Pictures of her and Mac kissing on the ranch porch, images of Lily hugging Kate outside the bakery, shots of the three of them together that had clearly been taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. These images tell a different story, Crawford said smoothly. They show a man who's supposed to be focused on his ward's welfare instead pursuing romantic entanglements. They show a child being exposed to adult relationships that could confuse her understanding of appropriate boundaries. Kate stared at the photographs, feeling violated and furious in equal measure. Someone had been stalking them, documenting their private moments to build a case against their happiness. The invasion of privacy was bad enough, but the twisted interpretation of innocent affection made her sick with rage. Those pictures show a family, Kate said firmly, meeting Crawford's gaze with steel in her voice. They show love and care and exactly the kind of stability Lily needs. Do they? Crawford's smile was shark-like in its coldness. Or do they show a man so distracted by his own desires that he's failing to provide adequate supervision for a vulnerable child, letting her spend hours unsupervised with a woman who has no legal relationship to her, exposing her to adult situations she's too young to understand? Kate realized with growing horror that Crawford had crafted his accusations carefully, twisting genuine moments of connection into evidence of neglect and impropriety. In the wrong hands, these photographs could indeed be used to suggest that Mac was prioritizing romance over responsibility. What do you want, Crawford? Kate asked, though she already suspected the answer. Crawford's mask of civility slipped slightly, revealing the calculating businessman beneath. I want Mac Hayes to understand that his current path is unsustainable. That pursuing a relationship with you while serving as Lily's guardian creates complications that could have serious legal ramifications. I want him to make the smart choice about his priorities. And if he doesn't, then I'll be forced to share my concerns with Child Protective Services. Crawford replied with false regret. As a concerned member of the community, I have an obligation to report situations that might compromise a child's welfare. Kate felt the walls closing in around the happiness she'd just begun to embrace. Crawford had trapped them in an impossible situation where their love for each other could be used as evidence against Mac's fitness as a guardian. The cruelty was breathtaking in its efficiency. You want the ranch, Kate said, understanding flooding through her. This isn't about Lily's welfare at all. You want Mac's land, and you're using a child as leverage to get it. Crawford's smile turned genuinely amused at her accusation. Miss Mitchell, I'm a businessman. I see opportunities and I pursue them. If Mac Hayes wants to keep his family intact, he'll need to make some difficult choices about what matters most to him. After Crawford left, Kate stood alone in her bakery feeling like she'd been physically assaulted. The photographs lay scattered across her counter, tangible evidence of how their private joy had been transformed into public ammunition. She thought about Mac's devotion to Lily, the way he'd sacrificed everything to provide stability for a grieving child, and felt her heart break at the impossible choice Crawford was forcing him to make. The bell above her door chimed, and Kate looked up to see Dr. James Thompson entering with the concerned expression of someone who'd heard troubling news. Kate, I just saw Crawford leaving. He looked entirely too pleased with himself for my comfort. Kate gestured helplessly at the photographs, unable to find words for the devastation she was feeling. James studied the images with growing anger, his medical training allowing him to recognize the emotional manipulation at work. "This is unconscionable," James said firmly. "These pictures show nothing inappropriate. They show a man and woman who care about each other and a child who's thriving in their presence." "Crawford doesn't care about appropriateness," Kate replied, her voice hollow with defeat. "He cares about results, and he's found a way to make our love into a weapon against Lily's security." James was quiet for several moments, and Kate could see him working through the implications of Crawford's threat. As Millbrook Valley's only doctor, James had dealt with Child Protective Services before and understood how even unfounded accusations could create bureaucratic nightmares that lasted for months. "Kate, what if there was a way to turn this situation to your advantage?" James asked slowly. "What if instead of defending against Crawford's accusations, you went on the offensive?" Kate looked at him with surprise, not understanding how their desperate situation could be transformed into an opportunity. "What do you mean?" "I mean Crawford has made a tactical error by threatening you directly. He's revealed his true motivations and his willingness to use a child as a pawn in his business dealings. That kind of behavior might not sit well with other members of the community if they knew about it." Kate felt a spark of hope kindle in her chest as she began to understand James's suggestion. "You think we should expose what he's really doing?" "I think Crawford is counting on you and Mac being too scared and too isolated to fight back effectively," James replied. "He's banking on your love being a weakness instead of a strength. Maybe it's time to prove him wrong." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating, requiring Kate to step completely outside her comfort zone and risk everything on the hope that justice would prevail over manipulation. But the alternative was accepting defeat and losing the family she'd just begun to embrace. "How would we even begin to fight someone like Crawford?" Kate asked. "He has money, influence, connections throughout the county." James smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting years for an opportunity to challenge the banker's unchecked power. "Crawford's influence depends on people being afraid to oppose him. But he's made enemies over the years. People he's manipulated and cheated, who would love to see him brought down. We just need to give them a reason to come forward." Over the next hour, James outlined a strategy that was audacious in its scope. They would document Crawford's pattern of predatory behavior, gathering testimony from other families he'd targeted. They would expose his true motivations for pursuing Mac's ranch, revealing the financial incentives behind his sudden concern for child welfare. Most importantly, they would do it publicly, using the upcoming summer festival as a platform to present their case to the entire community. "It's a huge risk," James acknowledged. "If it backfires, if the community chooses to support Crawford over you and Mac, it could make things much worse." Kate thought about Mac's gentle hands and patient love, about Lily's infectious laughter and fierce hugs, about the family they'd been building together one careful day at a time. The thought of losing them to Crawford's greed made her feel physically ill. But the thought of surrendering without a fight felt even worse. "James," Kate said with growing determination, "what do we need to do?" The next few days passed in a blur of secretive meetings and careful planning. Anna drove up from Denver with a briefcase full of legal research about Crawford's business practices. Helen Foster used her network of longtime residents to gather stories about families who'd been pressured into selling their properties below market value. Mary Beth Anderson and other ranchers provided statements about Mac's character and his devotion to Lily. Kate found herself at the center of a conspiracy designed to protect the love she'd been too afraid to embrace until Mac had shown her it was possible. The irony wasn't lost on her that fighting for their relationship required her to step completely outside the careful isolation she'd maintained for 3 years. On Thursday evening, Mac arrived at the bakery after closing time, his expression grim and his posture tense with barely controlled fury. Kate knew immediately that Crawford had made his move, had delivered his ultimatum with the brutal efficiency of a man accustomed to getting his way. "He came to the ranch today," Mac said without preamble, settling heavily at one of the café tables. "Brought those photographs and made his position very clear. Either I end our relationship and focus exclusively on being Lily's guardian, or he reports his concerns to Child Protective Services. Kate moved to sit across from him, reaching for his hands across the small table. Mac, we don't have to let him win. James and Anna have been working on a plan to expose what Crawford's really doing. Mac's expression was torn between hope and skepticism as Kate outlined their strategy for the summer festival confrontation. She could see him weighing the risks against the potential rewards, calculating whether their love was worth the gamble. Crawford was forcing them to make. Kate, if this backfires, if we make things worse instead of better, I could lose Lily permanently. Not just temporarily during an investigation, but actually lose custody if CPS decides I'm an unfit guardian. The fear in his voice was palpable, and Kate understood completely why the prospect of fighting back felt more dangerous than simply surrendering to Crawford's demands. Mac had already lost his brother and sister-in-law. The thought of losing Lily too was almost unbearable. But if we don't fight, Kate said gently, we lose each other for certain, and Lily loses the chance to have a complete family. The mother figure she's been craving since her parents died. Mac was quiet for several minutes, staring at their joined hands as he wrestled with the impossible choice Crawford had created. Finally, he looked up and Kate saw resolution replacing fear in his expression. What do you need me to do? The summer festival dawned with perfect weather and an atmosphere of celebration that belied the drama about to unfold. Kate arrived early to set up her competition entry, a spectacular cake that had taken her 3 days to complete. But the baking competition was just the opening act for what she really planned to accomplish. As the winner of the blue ribbon she'd never been brave enough to pursue before, Kate was invited to address the crowd from the festival's main stage. Instead of sharing baking tips, she used her platform to tell a very different kind of story. She spoke about Crawford's systematic targeting of vulnerable families, using Anna's research to document a pattern of predatory behavior that had been hidden in plain sight for years. She talked about the photographs and threats, the way love had been weaponized to create fear and compliance. She challenged the community to decide what kind of town they wanted to be. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Families who'd been victimized by Crawford stepped forward with their own stories. Business owners who'd witnessed his tactics added their voices to the growing chorus of opposition. By the end of Kate's speech, Crawford found himself facing not just one determined woman, but an entire community that had finally seen his true nature clearly. The custody complaints disappeared as quickly as they'd appeared, with Crawford apparently deciding that retreat was preferable to continued public scrutiny. Within a week, he'd quietly left Millbrook Valley for opportunities elsewhere, his reputation in ruins and his influence permanently broken. As the festival wound down and fireworks began to light up the mountain sky, Kate found herself standing with Mac and Lily beside the stage where she'd made her public declaration of love and commitment. Lily was glowing with pride and sugar-induced happiness, while Mac held Kate's hand with the secure grip of a man who no longer had to choose between love and responsibility. "Miss Kate," Lily said, leaning against Kate's side with the casual affection of a child who'd found her place in the world. "That was the bravest thing I ever saw anyone do. You fought for our family like a real mom would." Kate's heart swelled with emotion as she realized that somewhere during their battle for the right to love each other, she'd stopped being afraid of the future and started building it instead. The 30 days Mac had asked for had become the foundation for a lifetime of possibilities. "I love you too, little one," Kate whispered, wrapping her arms around both Mac and Lily as the fireworks exploded overhead. "I love both of you more than I ever thought I could love again." Mac's kiss was gentle and sure, tasting of promises kept and dreams finally allowed to flourish. When they broke apart, all three of them were laughing, drunk on happiness and the sweet knowledge that sometimes love really could conquer fear. 6 months later, Kate stood in a simple white dress holding wild flowers picked from the meadows around Sunset Ridge Ranch. The wedding was small and perfect, attended by the community that had rallied around their love. As Max slipped a gold band onto her finger, Kate felt David's presence like a blessing rather than a burden. A gentle reminder that love didn't end with death, but expanded to encompass new joy. Lily served as flower girl and unofficial matchmaker, beaming with pride as she watched her carefully orchestrated plan come to fruition. During the reception, she pulled Kate aside with the serious expression she wore for important announcements. "Mom Kate," she said, the title coming naturally now, "I think you should know that I've been praying for you to marry Uncle Mac since the first day you made me that chocolate cake. I figured God needed some help arranging things." Kate laughed through tears of joy, marveling at the wisdom of a child who'd understood from the beginning what the adults had been too scared to acknowledge. Sometimes the best gifts came disguised as ordinary moments, and sometimes the greatest love stories began with desperate pleas and patient hearts. As the evening wound down, Kate found herself standing with Mac on their front porch, watching Lily chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. The child who'd brought them together was finally secure in the knowledge that love didn't have to disappear, that families could grow rather than just diminish. "No regrets?" Mac asked, pulling Kate close. Kate smiled, thinking of all the fears she'd conquered to reach this moment of perfect contentment. "Only that it took me so long to believe you when you said I could love again." Mac's laughter was warm and satisfied. 30 days, he reminded her. "You promised me 30 days to prove you wrong. It only took 29. Kate kissed her husband under the vast Montana sky, surrounded by the sound of their daughter's laughter and the sweet knowledge that sometimes the best love stories were the ones that began with whispered fears and ended with shouted joy. She'd learned to love again, not because Mac had forced her to, but because he'd created the safety and space for love to grow naturally. The 30 days had become 30 years in her heart, a lifetime of love that had begun with a man brave enough to challenge her fears and gentle enough to heal her heart. Kate had learned to love again, and in doing so, had learned to live again too. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.